December 19th, 1979. An ordinary night in Cedar Rapids becomes the genesis of Iowa's most haunting murder mystery. 18-year-old Michelle Martinko vanishes, her brutal death leaving behind nothing but chilling silence and 29 unanswered wounds. Decades pass, but her case will transform justice forever. What detail, hidden for years, cracked the murder case that forever changed Iowa? Michelle Martinko spent her last evening surrounded by the familiar faces of her high school choir. The Sheraton Inn's banquet room hummed with the low chatter of classmates and teachers, a winter tradition for the Kennedy Concert Choir. Michelle, dressed in a black jersey dress and wrapped in her waist-length rabbit fur jacket, looked every bit the part of a senior on the verge of adulthood. She carried a brown leather purse and, tucked inside, $180, money set aside for a new winter coat her mother had put on layaway at Westdale Mall. After dinner, Michelle asked her friend from the twirling squad to come along to the mall. The friend declined, so she tried another acquaintance who first agreed but changed her mind. So Michelle, used to her own company, drove alone through the cold December streets in her family's tan and green 1972 Buick Electra. The newly opened mall was a place she knew well. She worked there, and the bright lights and decorated shop windows must have felt both ordinary and festive that night. Inside, Michelle stopped to chat with friends and acquaintances. Her ex-boyfriend, Andy Seidel, crossed her path. She browsed the stores, made small talk, and kept her focus on the practical errand that brought her out, picking up the winter coat. Around 9 p.m., she was seen outside a jewelry store, her distinctive jacket catching the eye of someone who would later remember that moment. That was the last confirmed sighting of Michelle Martinko alive. The hours that followed slipped quietly by. No one noticed her leaving the mall. No one recalled seeing her walk across the vast, shadowed parking lot. The rhythm of her evening, banquet, errands, brief conversations, was so unremarkable that it's only in hindsight, that each detail becomes loaded with meaning. Michelle's absence at home would soon turn the ordinary into the unimaginable. But for now, her night seemed like any other. At 4 a.m., the search ended in the northeast corner of the Westdale Mall parking lot. Michelle's Buick Electra sat alone beneath the harsh glare of security lights, its windows already frosting over in the December cold. Officers approached, found the car locked, and forced open the door. Inside, the scene was almost silent. Michelle was slumped over the passenger seat, her body still, her purse undisturbed on the floorboard. The brutality was immediately clear. Blood stained the front seats and pooled around her, a stark contrast to the neatness of her black dress and fur jacket. The medical examiner counted 29 stab wounds concentrated on her face, neck, and chest. Her hands were laced with deep cuts, defensive wounds, showing she had fought back with everything she had. There were no signs of robbery. The cash and her jewelry were untouched. Her clothes were in place, and the medical examiner would later confirm there was no sexual assault. The attack was personal, frenzied, and left no doubt that her killer intended to end her life. Technicians worked methodically, collecting every scrap of evidence. They found no fingerprints, nothing on the door handles, the steering wheel, or the gear shift. Instead, they discovered faint impressions in both dirt and blood, the outline of rubber gloves. Whoever did this had come prepared, determined not to leave a trace. Still, they missed something. Blood, not Michelle's, had stained the gearshift and left a spot on her dress. In 1979, that detail meant little. The technology to read the story in those drops did not exist yet, but the samples were carefully preserved and logged, sealed in evidence bags for a future no one could yet imagine. The first responders, the medical examiner, and crime scene technicians moved through the car with a quiet urgency. Every action was noted, every item bagged and tagged. The weight of the moment pressed on all of them. The violence of the attack, the lack of motive, and the calculated effort to erase evidence pointed to a killer who understood what he was doing. In the darkness before dawn, the scene was frozen in time. Every detail preserved, every question left unanswered, the hope for answers resting on evidence that would wait decades for its voice. Evidence from that December morning sat boxed and sealed, untouched for years at a time. The dress, the jacket, the blood-stained gearshift, all carefully labeled, logged, and shelved in the hope that someday science would catch up. In the first months after Michelle's murder, detectives followed every lead, but each one dissolved into uncertainty. The killer had worn gloves, leaving behind only faint impressions in dirt and blood. No fingerprints, no clear trail. More than 80 suspects came under scrutiny. Each investigated, questioned, and eventually released when nothing tied them to the scene. The case file grew thick with reports and dead ends. In 1980, police turned to the tools they had: interviews, hypnosis sessions with potential witnesses, and a composite sketch based on fleeting memories. The sketch, a white male, late teens or early 20s, brown, curly hair, became a fixture in the station, but it led nowhere. The public's tips slowed and then stopped. The suspect's face faded into rumor, never matching anyone known to Michelle or her family. Years passed. Detectives retired or moved on, and the case was handed off again and again. Still, the evidence remained. Blood, not Michelle's, preserved from the gearshift and a spot on her dress. In 2006, a cold case investigator reviewed the files and realized these samples held more promise than anyone in 1979 could have imagined. Lab technicians developed a full male DNA profile and entered it into CODIS, the national database. The result came back empty. Whoever killed Michelle had never been arrested, never been compelled to give a sample, never surfaced in any other crime. The Martinko case became a fixture in Cedar Rapids, an unsolved puzzle that haunted the department. Each new detective started with the same boxes, the same bags, the same unanswered questions. The evidence waited, silent and unchanged, through years of disappointment and hope. For decades, the only certainty was that the answer was out there somewhere, locked inside a few drops of blood and a dress sealed away from time. In 2017, the Martinko case file landed on the desk of a new generation of investigators. The evidence, bloodstains sealed away for decades, was sent to a forensic lab specializing in DNA phenotyping. The lab returned a prediction. The killer was likely a white man with fair skin, blue eyes, and light hair, of Northern European descent. Detectives released the composite image to the public, hoping someone would recognize the face science had drawn from a single drop of blood. Tips came in, but none led to a name. The real breakthrough arrived the following year. Investigators turned to genetic genealogy, uploading the unknown DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public database where people search for relatives and roots. The system registered a distant familial hit, a cousin, somewhere in the branches of a sprawling family tree. Forensic genealogists began the painstaking work of mapping relationships, tracing lines back through generations, and narrowing the pool to a handful of men living in Iowa. 3 names surfaced. 2 were quickly ruled out by direct comparison. 1 remained. Jerry Lynn Burns, a man from Manchester, Iowa, who had never been in the police database, never left a criminal record. Detective Matt Denlinger and his team needed a direct DNA sample to confirm what the genealogy had suggested. In October 2018, they watched Burns at a local restaurant, waiting for an opportunity. When he finished his meal and left behind a used straw, investigators collected it, bagged it, and sent it to the state crime lab. The DNA from that straw matched the profile taken from Michelle Martinko's dress and the gearshift of her Buick nearly 40 years earlier. For the first time, the evidence had a name. On December 19, 2018, the anniversary of Michelle's murder, police arrested Jerry Lynn Burns. The blood Michelle fought to draw from her attacker had become the key to solving her own case, reaching across decades to identify the man who thought he'd never be found. In December 1979, Michelle Martinko's murder left Cedar Rapids with more than 80 investigated suspects and no answers for nearly 40 years. The preserved blood evidence from her dress and gearshift, cataloged in original case files, ultimately provided the breakthrough. In 2018, forensic genealogy linked the DNA to Jerry Lynn Burns, confirmed by a covertly collected sample and official laboratory match. Yet, some questions remain, such as the full motive and what led to the attack that night, details not fully documented in available records. This case changed the way cold cases are pursued, as Iowa investigators began using genetic genealogy in other unsolved crimes, according to state police reports. Today, the Martinko case stands as proof that persistence, careful evidence handlings, and new technology can bring resolution, even decades later. For investigators and families, the evidence speaks. Answers can still emerge from the past.